Your thyroid is the master endocrine gland. It controls your gonads. It controls your adrenals. So if your thyroid's not healthy, the stuff down there is not going to be so healthy either. So make sure you're taking care of your thyroid. And that is why we talk about the accelerated iodine and the accelerated thyroid. And I've had women and young women who have said, oh my gosh, my period came and it went, and I didn't have any PMS symptoms anymore. It was amazing. So I love that you talk about the thyroid. I want to get to the gut, but I really want to start with insulin resistance. Dr. Robert Lustig says that insulin resistance at the liver is fatty liver disease. Insulin resistance at the heart is heart disease. Insulin resistance at the ovaries is PCOS. So how much of that do you believe is true? And I want to get into the fact that insulin resistance isn't just about carbs, but other things that can contribute to it as well, which then can lead into things like PCOS.
Well, just as a slight diversion, just echoing what you said about thyroid, it's like everything in life. It's multidimensional, bidirectional. So it turns out that there are estrogen receptors on the thyroid gland, and there are thyroid receptors on the ovary. So it's like, talk about like chicken egg, it's like a feed forward thing. When one thing is wrong, the other one is going to be wrong. And then it makes the other one even more wrong, right? So, you got to work on all of the above. And which gets to the question you just asked about the insulin resistance and the ovary. So in what we'll say the classic PCOS, the starting point is actually the ovaries not producing the vital life hormone estradiol. So just so that people know, estrogen is not a hormone. It's a family of hormones, just like fat. What's fat? There's like different kinds of fats. People know that now, but they didn't know that. And years ago, it wasn't that many. They would demonize all fat, based on bad fat, like trans fat, manufactured fat. And now a lot of people are demonizing estrogen because of chemical, made up manufactured estrogens or imbalances based on metabolic dysfunction. But the estrogen that's naturally made by the ovaries is estradiol. And in order to make that particular estrogen, you need to have the first thing, which is made by the ovaries, which is testosterone. So all estradiol is derived from testosterone. So the ovaries, it's like an assembly line. The ovaries first make testosterone, and then it moves into the next phase of the assembly line, where an enzyme called aromatase comes into play and converts the testosterone into estradiol. Well, it turns out that women with the classic form of PCOS, which is like 80%, that their enzyme aromatase, for various and sundry reasons that can go back to in utero exposures to endocrine disruptors like plastics and these other chemicals that actually can change how your whole system develops right during the beginning. The whole endocrine system is a little bit off. And so this aromatase enzyme isn't working so as well. It does work. It doesn't as well as it should. So what happens is the brain, which has sensors to the estrogen, says, hey, ovaries, I need more estrogen. You're not making enough. So it puts out the signal, which goes to the pituitary, which then puts out the signal to the ovaries to make first more testosterone, and then to convert it to estradiol. But it's not doing that well. So it's kind of like a little glitch in the system. So you end up with too much testosterone and not enough estradiol. Well, it turns out that estradiol is also a master hormone. And it sets thyroid, it works on the gut microbiome, and it regulates insulin and glucose transporters. So what happens is when you don't have enough estradiol, you will, and this happens to women as they transition into menopause too, when it's different mechanism, but they both end up with a system, their body, without enough estradiol. Then you don't transport the glucose properly, adequately into the cells. And when you have too much glucose circulating, the body will respond through the pancreas to make more insulin. And then if the insulin isn't working optimally, and that can be related to more inflammation, it becomes like a whole circle of events, like a snowball type of thing, where you end up when you don't have enough estradiol, it also alters the gut microbiome, and then you don't have the right microbes, and then you don't make the proper mucus protectant, and then you get impaired gut barrier or leaky gut, and you have dysbiosis, and you have systemic inflammation. It's like a whole system of things that kind of go awry, and it's complex, which is why the conventional medical system doesn't want to deal with it, because you have to understand the role that estrogen in the form of estradiol plays throughout the entire body. And when you don't have enough, every system is impacted. And it's huge, the effect on inflammation, because every immune cell also has estrogen receptors, and they become more like I call them like weapons of mass destruction without actual having good control. So they produce more inflammatory products, inflammatory cytokines, and then that creates more insulin resistance. So you can see it's like another feed forward problem here. And then you have also problems with the ovaries. The ovaries themselves become inflamed. It's amazing. When they take out with little tiny needles, they can draw out fluid that surrounds the eggs. And they find that fluid, the follicular fluid, is infiltrated with all of these inflammatory cells. So yes, the ovaries then become more inflamed. They become more insulin resistant as well. But the initial problem in women with PCOS stems from having an inadequate conversion of testosterone into estradiol. And then to make matters worse, it turns out that due to our bodies living in these chemical soups of all these endocrine disruptors, or what they call like xenoestrogens, like fake estrogens that can interfere with normal estrogen signaling, the estrogen receptors are not working optimally either. So even the estrogen in the form of estradiol that's produced doesn't optimally like turn on the switches in the cells, because the receptor, just like insulin resistance, the insulin doesn't work optimally. So too, when you have like resistance of your estrogen receptors, the estrogen that you have doesn't work optimally either. So it's like a double whammy effect. And you end up with this very complex kind of conglomeration of symptoms where you have leaky gut, systemic inflammation, insulin resistance, like metabolic dysfunction. And that leads to infertility because the eggs are not in a good environment. And you have the problem with ovulation because you don't have the proper signaling through even the pituitary, because in addition to not producing enough estradiol, you have problems with the other signaling hormone that comes from the pituitary, the follicle stimulating hormone, that you don't make enough of it to actually trigger the proper selection of the egg and shut down the antimullerian hormone, which is what the hormone that recruits all the little follicles. That's why you end up with all these follicles around the cortex or rim, because you keep recruiting like the contestants in a beauty contest, and they're like all contestants, all these follicles, and they say, pick me. But nature has this special system with FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, to pick the egg that's like the special one that gets to actually ovulate. And that doesn't happen properly. So you just keep recruiting more follicles, but you don't pick the special one to ovulate because of the hormonal dysregulation. So you can see how it's very complicated, and not too many people get into the depth of it. But by understanding this, you can actually create a very in-depth and very appropriate focused approach to treating women with PCOS.
So just everybody take a step back. I don't care if you're dealing with PCOS or heart disease or fatty liver. Just what Dr. Gersh was talking about, the intricacies of the way the body works. And it is complicated. It's not one medication that is going to take care of your fatty liver. It is not one medication that's going to take care of your heart disease. Everything is so interrelated, and it's a domino effect, and it's a feedback loop, and it's a double feedback loop. I mean, it is so intricate. Our bodies truly are a miracle. So that's why you want to get to the root cause, fix that, and everything will go away. And I bet for those of you that are obese or have fatty liver and PCOS, when you fix your hormones and your PCOS, the other things will probably take care of themselves as well. because they're all kind of related to that same root cause.